Hello.
Hi, long time no see.
There.
Are you White? You are Whitehall. I was like, who in the world is that?
Oh, I'll rename myself. Sorry.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so I don't,
But nobody else is here, yeah?
yeah.
Nobody else is here yet.
So I
Maybe
don't
we'll be
have anything
lucky.
like formally prepared, Todd. But I was going to talk about kind of things I'd done before, and you guys can ask me questions, and then we'll,
Yep.
we'll make it go.
Cool.
Uh,
Hey, is my background correct? I see, because I
yep.
see it on my, okay.
Yep.
I
Looks
hate that
good.
reversal thing, but
I know you can change it. But yeah, it's mine looks backwards as well.
okay.
Um,
You gave me one of those backgrounds, right?
yeah, it should still be in your you only have to
You said
upload
it,
it
you
once.
said it to me, Mike.
Yeah, there we go.
You can also
Hey,
go with
well,
this.
wait, go back. We look great. Let me take a screenshot because it might just be. Okay, we do have one student. Okay, say cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just been so far behind. I just apologize for not having my stuff together.
Oh, no worries.
Hi, Jared.
How's it going?
Hi,
Hi, Jared.
Jared.
Good. I think you
Philip's
got
here.
the invite. I'm chairing the session on Thursday, and I was just saying I have not very well prepared, so we're hoping to have a discussion tomorrow.
Oh, about the
EV insights.
yeah, and so well, because
He's
you're
I'm
moderating.
moderating it.
moderating.
Yeah.
Gosh, I've got mitigate stuck in my head. Yeah, so you're moderating, and you don't know what questions to ask.
Well, I thought it'd be good if each of us spend 5 minutes
Hi, Philip.
to either show some pictures or talk about who you are and why you're here, and then we can go through some questions and answers. But like you can send me some.
So I sent an invite for tomorrow, but we also have speed
Speed
networking
networking.
in the morning, which I tagged you all in. If you all can make it to that, we could also do it then. So either is fine. We're basically just going to get you prepared. Philip, sorry, we're talking about a panel that they're on this week. So um, that's what the context there. But yes, everybody, welcome to the third lecture of the H2 Aviation Policy and Power cohort. Um, I regret to announce that Frank had a family emergency and cannot lecture this morning. I didn't have a chance to update that. But that's okay. We are just shifting around, and instead we're going to do Mike and Todd, who I think originally were going to do like the next lecture. but um but yeah, so it's still going to be a great lecture. And so what we'll start with is Mike, I would love to start with you, and you shared some insights on what you did at Vertical Flight Society. Perhaps start by explaining what Vertical Flight Society is, how it's structured, and then talk about some of the work that you did with uh
Yeah.
ACG. I wanted to say AMC, like no, that's the movies. And and anyway, yeah, if you could kind of go into that as a case study, like what you were going to do in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
I think that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Vertical Flight Society was founded in 1943 as the American Helicopter Society, just as the first helicopters were being built and being ordered for operational service. Basically, during World War II, Sikorsky got a contract in January of 1943 to start delivering really experimental helicopters to the Army Air Forces. And basically, the next month they said we should have a society, we should have a professional society for helicopters. I became the executive director, the sixth executive director in its 83-year history in 2011. And In 2018, we renamed it the Vertical Flight Society because it was more than helicopters and more than American. But In the 2000s, my predecessor had worked with had originally worked with Congressman Kurt Weldon, who represented the Philadelphia area, which was part of his district, which is where the where Boeing helicopters is located. I'm not so familiar with the new website, but if you go to legacy.vtol.org /legacy, I guess it is, .org/legacy. This has some of the stuff, kind of the history of stuff that we did. There we go. This is the old website. They upgraded it in October, and I'm not sure where the new stuff is. But anyway, so in the 2000 timeframe, so there was this guy, Mike Barbera, who was a staffer for Congressman Kurt Weldon, and it started a Congressional Rotorcraft Caucus. And so a caucus is a group of congressional members who are aligned on a certain issue. So there's, for instance, there's I guess, Department of War Research and Development Caucus. There's a there was this Congressional Rotorcraft Caucus. There was an Army Aviation Caucus. If there were enough, there's probably a hydrogen caucus. I don't know. Todd, maybe let you jump in and explain a caucus a bit more and some other examples.
Sure. Yeah, there is a hydrogen caucus. Caucuses are groups of Congress folks who decide that they want to have their name associated with an issue, and they can work sort of together, even across the aisle, to support legislation toward that issue. A lot of people join a caucus because it's going to look good on their list of caucuses, but then there are people who join a caucus because they're passionate about it. And then usually the chair of the caucus or the co-chair of the caucus are really the drivers of it.
Yeah.
Could
Thanks.
you, sorry to interrupt, but could you explain the difference between a caucus and a consortium?
Yeah, and also the other one that's confusing is a caucus, I just blanked on it, but there's a consortium, and then so caucus is a group of members of Congress. Coalition is help me out here too, but Todd, a coalition is a group of companies that are working with Congress on a specific issue. And then a consortium is a group of companies that join together to form, basically, I think it's usually a 501c6, a trade organization, to lobby for an issue. So
Right.
the caucus is members trying to push an issue. I can't say it. The consortium is companies that are band together to force an issue or to
Right.
an issue. And then a coalition is something that's, I guess, something more in between, right? I guess a coalition can be nonprofits and other things, but can you give a better definition, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, you could even have, it could even be like FAA could get together with
High Sky.
High Sky or with Vertical Flight Society, right? And that would be part of it.
And I'll just say there is a Modern Skies coalition that when I was with Vertical Flight Society we joined, and it's like 100 different nonprofits and companies and this is started 3 years ago now, but or 2 years ago, which was to
Mike,
modern air traffic control.
If I could jump in before you get into Modern Skies, because you kind of went quickly through this, could you take us slowly through? So vertical flights, I want people to understand this conversation isn't just to talk about Vertical Flight Society. They're an organization that's been around for almost 100 years, and it was vertical flight, aka helicopters, gyrocopters, etc. So just traditional vertical flight. And then when Mike took over, well, Mike, did you change the name to vertical? Because it was American Helicopter Society, right?
Yeah, no, society. And there's a difference between a society and an association. But in 97, we started going by AHS International to downplay the American and the helicopter part. And here's the joke, okay, the engineering joke. We were going to call it the International Rotorcraft Society, but then we would have been the IRS, and nobody in America would.
So then take us through why this organization that's been around for almost 100 years why you felt the need to lobby. That's the part I want people to grasp.
Sure. The organization, when it was started in 1943, there were different laws as far as, 501c3, charitable nonprofit and things like that. And so in 1967, when they came up, I guess, with these new classifications of nonprofits, somehow we were named as a trade association, a 501c6, which is a business league that exists for the purpose of promoting business and for companies to make more money. And organizations like Vertical Aviation International, which used to be the Helicopter Association International, AIA, the Aerospace Industries Association, those nonprofits exist to help the companies make more profits. So that's an association. A society, so an association, the members of a association are companies, whereas in general, the members of a society, or sometimes an institute, the core members are people. So American Helicopter Society was really a group for the benefit of people. They can have company members, but legally they exist for the benefit of society in general. High Sky exists to advance hydrogen aviation for the world. It doesn't exist to make, Zero Avia to help them make money. Of course, that's always good. You want your members to be healthy and you want them to be successful. But we're 501c3s, charitable nonprofits, or technical nonprofits exist to advance the technology and understanding. When American Helicopter Society was founded in 1943, and again, the laws were a little bit different there, but there were no other helicopter societies, so it was very much working with the Army, the Navy, the military, as well as early helicopter operations, and trying to help everybody understand the challenges of helicopters, how to make them better, promoting the use and profitability or operational capabilities of helicopters. Now, over time, fast forward 70 years, and the helicopter industry matured, and the companies were selling helicopters, and other associations came up. Notably, used to be Helicopter Association of America. They changed their name to Helicopter Association International. VFS in '97 changed it to AHS International. Then we changed it to the Vertical Flight Society, and they changed it to Vertical Aviation International. So we're always a couple of years ahead of them, because we're always looking at the new capabilities. Anyway, I'll just say VFS always existed for the advancement of technology, and you need funding to advance technology. So I'm sorry, that's just so distracting. I've got to turn that off. So the
Me?
Yeah, just flipping through all the pictures is.
Oh, sorry. I'll stop. I'll stop doing that.
No, sorry, I flipped off it, but it was scrambling my brain.
Okay.
But I'll just say, so I joined in '96, and AHS was a leading advocate for vertical flight technology, and the advancement of vertical flight. Around the 2000 timeframe, the Bush administration canceled NASA rotorcraft. They were getting out of, helicopters were, mature technology, didn't need any more help. Everything that could ever be done with a helicopter had already been done. So VFS stood up this, or helped to stand up this Congressional Rotorcraft Caucus, which lobbied for restoring NASA, saving the NASA Ames wind tunnel, the world's largest wind tunnel. NASA administration had mothballed it, so rescued that. Did a lot of work with the Army, with NASA, but with supported Congress to make these things happen, basically. So that wasn't so much funding. Funding was related, but it was more of saving the the U.S. Helicopter technical capabilities. And then in the 2008 timeframe, I'm trying to remember now because that was before my time, but so 2008, there became a lot of discussion about, well, what comes from military aircraft? What comes, we've got Apaches, we've got Blackhawks, are great aircraft. We've got the V-22. It was becoming operational. What's the next thing after that? I mean, these aircraft were designed in the early 70s or late 70s. So what we know helicopters and vertical flight aircraft can do a lot more. So starting in 2008, but really under my tenure in 2011, we convinced Congress, and we can convince, so it was 2008. My predecessor, with some help from the AHS lobbyist, Mike Barbera, and at the time the lobbying firm was called American Continental Group. Now it's called ACG Consulting, I think it is. And he and one of his other colleagues will be presenting or talking in a couple weeks. Anyway, so he's been this common thread with all these things. Executive directors come and go. I have a successor now. He's still the guy. So he knows aviation, and I highly recommend if anybody is looking for a lobbyist, Mike Barbera. Highly recommended. I've talked to him he knows eVTOL AM very well. I've talked to him a number of times about hydrogen, but I didn't have any funding when I was at VFS for that kind of thing. So 2008, we were able to get in language. So, there's two things in Congress. There's appropriations, which is funding, and there's authorization.
Hold on, Mike. Sorry to interrupt, but I want to take you back just a tad. You were saying, there's rotorcraft, the V-22, but then what's next? Because I think that what next part is kind of analogous to hydrogen aviation. So like, sure, you had this thought of what's next, and then what was that what's next, and then what did you guys do?
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Okay.
So 2008, in the FY 2009 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, it said that the Department of Defense will start the Future Vertical Lift Program. And some of those words were exactly what, Mike Barbera and my predecessor, Rhett Flater, had done. And with one of our member companies, they were actually got one of the congressmen, I'm blanking on his name at the moment, from Pennsylvania, but got that in. So that started the Future Vertical Lift Program, which after now almost 20 years, resulted in the Bell MV-75 Cheyenne II high-speed future long-range assault aircraft tilt rotor. And they spent several $1 billion on that, and a couple other programs that eventually, sadly got canceled, but this was Future Vertical Lift, FVL, was intended to replace all of the Defense Department's rotorcraft with new, next gen stuff. So that with the support of the companies, I actually got a letter signed by the CEOs of the main helicopter companies to the Deputy Secretary of Defense that said, we really want you guys to do this. I mean, I did a lot of stuff like that. Actually, it's not on that legacy page. There's a link at the bottom to the page that we did, but you can find it on another one. Yeah, so scroll down to the bottom where it says Future Vertical Lift, one paragraph up. So this stuff here, 2008, that's what I just mentioned here. This page here, so go over to the right, this talks about how we established Future Vertical Lift, and scroll down, you can see there's a link to the 2011, all the way down during the purple section. This is all what I'm talking about here. In fact, I should have had this in front of me so I could have just read it. But keep going down. We worked with a nonprofit vertical lift consortium. We signed, so here, so click on that letter to the Secretary of Defense. All right, you see that? I did that. Leon Panetta. Got all these people to sign this letter. In fact, for High Sky, we've talked about something similar like that. You can scroll down and see all the signatures. Yeah. There's my signature. But this was, saying what we thought we needed the Defense Department to do. We got, the heavyweights to sign it off. And this could be something, again, like what High Skies could do something with get a bunch of companies to sign this saying implement the FAA's hydrogen policy, implement NASA's hydrogen research, strong letters. So anyway, I started in 2011. I was mainly handling the congressional outreach and really the government relations stuff as the executive director for Vertical Flight Society, American Helicopter Society, HS International, whatever it was named at the time. I was doing this stuff. So Mike Barbera then came in, I think it was 2012 or 20, I think it was 2013. And like, I used to work with AHS. We got this stuff done, and maybe I could do some pro bono work. I'm like, yeah, we have no money. I'm not sure if I'm even going to be able to pay the employees. Things are really grim. So he did. And I went over. I told the story before, but I went over with him to meet with one of the congressional representatives' offices, right? So it was their military, and I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to go through this logical argument of, in the war in Afghanistan, we've lost 600 Americans and 400, helicopters because of, lack of technology. And I'm trying to lay out this really logical case. And Mike Barbera interrupts and says, well, the member's really been supportive of the military before and hoping that he might be able to again. And the staff was like, yep, okay. um, so I know I told that story before, but it's like, you need to know how to, well, first of all, and I said this also before, your congressional representatives are there to represent you for American citizens, right? You've even whether you voted for them or not, like they represent your district with, for either state for a senator or the district for a representative. They are there. They should represent all of their members, all of their citizens, and support businesses in their district and in their state. And, if for those who are on certain committees, like if you're on a military committee, then you want to support military things, right? Same thing with science. If you're on a science committee, NASA committee, you generally want to be supportive of those activities. So going,
Quick question.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to make you lose your thought if you want to finish your point.
No. I was going to go over to the Planetary Society, but this is a good place.
Okay. So before we go to Planetary Society, so when you did this letter, was this before you got involved with Mike Barbero?
Yeah. So this is 2011. So the first 2 years, it was just me, and I tried to have some of our members help a little bit, kind of like this.
Yep.
But I didn't have this course, so I had to figure out, kind of by myself.
So I want people to, so the takeaway for me is in this case study that Mike is sharing with us, Vertical Flight Society, or, I think it was still AHS International at that point, was structured the same as High Sky Society. And so Mike, as a leader of a 501c3 nonprofit, which is what I am as a leader of a 501c3 nonprofit, and Mike's also a board member, he came up with this letter, and he had members of AHS sign it. And then you guys sent it to the Secretary of Defense. So the takeaway is that all of this work was done with just Mike, and then reaching out to members and saying, sign this letter, AKA that could be you, Philip, that will be you, Philip, that will be you, Jared. So we started drafting some letters, and Todd and Mike and myself. And so, so this was done, with his elbow grease, but there was no lobbyist paid for this, which I want to go back to this. So I guess, kind of.
This is a history. I think it's with the purple or lilac box over there, right? So this is the history of how VFS, AHS, how we lobbied to create this, trillion-dollar defense contract for Bell.
And then why can't I find the whole PDF on this? Usually it has like a PDF.
Well, this one is specifically, yeah, so this is a Duncan Hunter NDAA, but this was the one there's somewhere in there where it says, yeah. So if you go here, the section 255, this is where it says, you see it right there. You need to do a capabilities based assessment for this vertical,
Where does
future development. The
future?
bold, the stuff in the bold there,
Oh, okay. Thank you.
section 255.
Okay, and so then this part, so sorry, I want to just make sure I have this down. So the letter you did without a lobbyist, just on your own, had members sign it, and then you brought in Mike Barbera. Am I saying his last name correctly?
Yeah.
And his
Like,
firm,
just like
the lobbying
just
firm, and that's how this language became part of this act.
well, no, this is 2008, so this was
Okay,
previous
sorry.
tenure.
Oh, is it?
Basically, I'm gonna think of his name eventually. Representative Sistek talked to some members, and I think this was actually their language, but it was essentially what VFS had been proposing to be done. So with this section 255, it says it didn't say start a multi-trillion-dollar effort. It says Defense Department, you need to do a report, and this Defense Department, you need to do a capabilities-based assessment to outline a joint approach for a future development of vertical lift aircraft and rotorcraft. So it says write a report. And then when I came in 2011, it still wasn't done. They wrote a report. Well, they wrote a report about how they were going to do a capabilities-based assessment, but it wasn't the actual CBA. So that's where in that purple stuff, I think it's purple.
So were you not part of this happening? You just came in and
Correct.
saw like, hey, you guys are supposed to do this and you haven't done it yet, and that's what. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I started in 2011, June 1st, 2011. By September, we had this letter out. We were kicking ass. Under new leadership, we got a lot of stuff done. But
Nice.
This is before we did a lobbyist.
Okay. So this kind of was the precursor, then the letter, and then once you had the letter, you brought in Mike Barbera, and then he got it into. Let's I keep losing that.
No, I'll explain it here, but
All right. By the way, you can share your screen if you don't want to just watch me fumble around.
Yeah, maybe I should have.
I'm just fumbling around.
I'll just talk. That's all right.
Okay.
We'll see. Maybe I'll switch over.
Okay.
And I hope you guys can follow it. And I guess you guys can raise your hand or interrupt too if you want a better explanation of something. So 2008, so the FY 2009 Defense Authorization Act, and I do have a little bit more of a blow by blow of what happened exactly when. But I came in 2011, and this report, Congress was the Pentagon was supposed to write this report. Let me share. Sorry, I'm just going to exclude this there.
Thanks, I'm struggling.
Sorry, I just have this ultra wide screen, so I have to trick it a little bit here. And let me look in the chat. What's in the chat? Okay, there we go.
It was just me putting the link.
Yeah, okay. So this it's kind of funny because legacy.vtol is the old website, and then this page I created, 10 years ago, whatever, 15 years ago, was the legacy of the Vertical Flight Society over the past quarter century. But this 2008, we worked with industry and Congress, so we got language added, told the Pentagon to do the Future Vertical Lift Program. That's the Section 255. Let me go over here. And what happened with this page is I started this page to explain what the Future Vertical Lift Program was starting in 2015. So then I just kept adding stuff. We were doing every issue of the magazine, Vertiflight, which was every other month. We did, at least one issue on Future Vertical Lift. And I wrote a ton of stuff. But on the legacy side, the stuff we had done explains, even going back in the 90s, how the VFS, the Federal City Chapter, had a conference. This is what I mentioned before about the Congressional Rotorcraft Caucus, the 2009 Defense Bill. So I'm going back a little bit to what I said before, but this is, this language, and there's no money with it. It just said DOD write a report for the creation within the Pentagon of Joint Program Office, which it ended up not doing, but it basically a joint effort for all of the military, all of the services, including Coast Guard. So in 2010, they submitted this report to Congress, which is a report to Congress about a strategic plan. Well, it was a report about a plan. They didn't actually do the plan. So then working with this consortium, Vertical Lift Consortium, and they're a 501c6, so they're a trade business league, and they can get contracts directly with they got all their funding almost directly from contracting with the government. This is a letter showed here. And so there was another letter I think we signed to the deputy secretary, but this one in September 2011, just after the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And I drafted something probably, and then the government relations folks, people like Todd that actually know stuff, worked with the government relations guys for each of these companies, and tweaked it here and there and said, no, we should say this and we should say that. So that's how this actually ended up.
I just want to say something really quick. I might have already said this, but think of FVL, Future Vertical Lift, as hydrogen aviation, for the sake of where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mike was advocating that we need to do XYZ for future vertical lift, which included electric VTOL and things like that. So just when you see future vertical lift and what Mike did, think that's what we can do. That's what we will do now with hydrogen aviation.
Yeah, it didn't have anything to do with electric. That was later.
Okay, thank you.
It's basically advanced helicopters, advanced rotorcraft. So this was a
just to improve the technology that we've been using, outdated technology.
Yeah, so no helicopter is fly-by-wire, so they're all mechanical controls. But the V-22 Osprey, now the MV-75, the new Future Vertical Lift, is fly-by-wire. It's twice as fast, twice as far as a helicopter can go. Okay, so this was in September, and there was, instead of the Congressional Rotorcraft Caucus died after several years, but in 2011. There was an Army Aviation Caucus that was started. I'll just flip over that. Oh, that doesn't work. These links don't work after a decade or two. It's too bad.
Maybe Wayback Machine.
It's on here. That link didn't work. Anyway, so this was primarily formed by the Army Aviation Association of America, Quad A. So they're Army Aviation. They're the Army Aviation Association. So they started the Army Aviation Caucus, and a lot of that was, it's based in Huntsville. Army Aviation is based in Huntsville, so a lot of it is, how can we get more money into Huntsville? But anyway, so I gave a kickoff talk there, and then I mentioned we sent another letter. So this was to, God dang it, sorry. Again, this website's this is the old one. It's been deactivated. I'll find those links.
I would really like to rebuild this timeline, so when you find them we can put it on a page where the links work.
It's still on the website. It hadn't been deleted, just the links are broken now. They don't work. So we signed another letter that was saying, okay, we understand that you wrote that you did the strategic plan, so we're asking you now to actually sign it and send it to Congress. And then the Office of, I think it was actually the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and responded saying, yes, it's now signed. Or it was going to do it. So then October 12, 2012, they actually submitted to Congress. So it was like a 4-year effort, between getting the congressional direction to write a report and then to get it actually, the full report, the strategic plan actually submitted to Congress. And then meanwhile, the Army had actually awarded several study contracts. Let's see if this one works. Just give me 1 second here.
Just to remind everyone, please have grace with Mike. His lecture wasn't supposed to be for several weeks from now, but because we had the cancellation, Frank had an emergency. Mike
and Todd.
Mike and Todd, yes. Well, I was going to say the same about Todd, but he's not on yet. But yes, so thank you for this. Oh, this is very interesting.
I'm totally prepared. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so this is linked from that page, but this is the article I wrote, the 10-page article or 6-page article here that talks about the timeline of, all this back and forth of trying to get this stuff done. So, it took a lot of companies working together, a lot of people working together Congress, but we got it, it happened. And there were four different companies, AVX, Kiram Aircraft, Bell, and Sikorsky Boeing that were competing. Eventually it came down to technology demonstrators that competed between Bell and Sikorsky, and eventually they selected Bell. And this aircraft, apologies for the low resolution, but this aircraft has now been designated the MV-75 Cheyenne 2, and it's going to fly, I think, in the next year.
Side note, my brother's on that program.
Excellent. Yeah, so anyway, it takes it takes years. It takes years of working with congressional representatives, trying to get momentum, getting language, getting funding, getting the agencies to agree and to embrace it and actually do things. In this case, like I said, I was trying to make this logical argument about how the helicopters were 50 years old and, designed 50 years ago, and they need to be upgraded for future battlefields. And generally, hey, there's jobs involved, there's money involved. It's, defense has its own constituencies, right? I mean, their own momentum of, as Americans, we want to have a strong defense in general. So those all had a lot of momentum. I want to mention a couple other case studies, but I'll take any questions if anybody would like to ask.
I said in the chat, could you put this link in there? This is gold.
This article here?
Yep.
Yeah, and this is so in January of 2016, hey, that's 10 years ago, we had a special focus issue on future vertical lift. So I wrote the introduction. Then we had an article on each of the four competitors. And this is from this,
is that one of the links that you gave me, or can you put that link in there as well?
Well, this is this one here.
I mean, this whole page though.
Yeah. So this is the long version. I'll put the short one here. So we used to have, I used to have like a 3 or 4 letter abbreviation for everything that was important. So now it's Legacy, the old one, legacy.vtol.org /FVL. And these were you can still see my screen, right? So these were the 4 competitors at the time. Yeah. So that was one effort let me show you here down at the bottom. So Mike Barbera came in 2014, I guess.
Oh, before you go into that, I'm so sorry to interrupt again, but I wanted to ask, what happened in the timeline where you said, okay, now I need to hire a lobbyist?
Nothing. He came to me and said, hey, I helped get more money for help get actually I guess he didn't, but I helped help my predecessor, Rhett Flater, in the 2000s do all this stuff. And he said, I could probably do some stuff for pro bono, and I could go in and maybe get like $30 million for the helicopter industry.
Okay, so this is where you said, I can't pay you, but he said, okay, all right, okay.
Yeah, we'll do pro bono.
Okay,
I'm like, I don't, I got a leaky roof in the building. I don't know how I'm going to pay my employees.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Thank you.
So we had a member of the board who was specifically as a VP for Washington, D.C., and his job was to help support advocacy and things like that. And so, he and I, Dave Wilds and I, whenever talked to a bunch of different, offices over there. Also, John Piasecki in a couple, the later couple of years would go over himself or with Mike Barbera or John and me and go over there and talk to these different offices. And we were surprised by how successful we were. I mean, we were late in 2014. We kind of missed the early deadlines, and we're like, well, this is more just as much this year as it about. I mean, it's really more about next year. Like we're not expecting to get anything in FY15, but maybe for FY16. Well, we got money in FY15. We got $14 million. So we were asking for 30, and we got half the money, $14 million. So we were shocked and like, oh well, let's keep this going. We couldn't ask them to keep going pro bono, but I ended up basically splitting it with the vertical lift consortium, of which John Piasecki was the vice chair. So we got a total of $65 million and it really went to the small companies. It didn't go to Bell and Sikorsky. It went to the smaller competitors and technology developers.
That's exactly what I wanted to point out next was that I want the takeaway on this part for people to be, you weren't advocating that the Vertical Flight Society or I forget which one you were at this time, get this money. You were advocating for people that were working on future vertical lift technology. And those companies got the money. Vertical Flight Society did not. That was not your goal, correct?
Right. That is correct. We basically wanted more money to go to the Army with no strings attached, so that the Army could decide what was in the national defense, what was in the best interests of the military, the Army, and the Future Vertical Lift Program.
So yeah, by being in this cohort, what we are doing is we're basically replicating this case study, and we will advocate that this money go to organizations such as Eternium and FC Renew. Took me a minute.
Ethereum?
Okay, FC Renew is Philip and George. You're George. I'm sorry, Brian. You want to go by Brian? You're in Singapore, if I remember correctly, and we're going to have to look at what that looks like for Singapore. I know we've been chatting about that, but I think this is probably a good time to go before we go to the Planetary Society. Perhaps open up to questions. I hijacked questions like crazy because I want to write a very shortened version of this timeline for how we can replicate this model at High Sky. But by all means, please ask your questions and don't make me ask them all.
Hey, Mike, thanks for some great info. As we're kind of doing all this under the umbrella of High Sky and kind of with a, small tribal following here in a lot of ways, but not a lot of, almost very small business. What recommendations might you have for us in kind of banding our resources together as opposed to trying to do it yourself?
I don't, you want to answer that, Danielle or Todd, or?
I could take it. So Phil, great question. This is exactly the question I've asked Mike, and sometimes Mike's given me this feedback without me asking. And he says, Danielle, we need to write a letter and we need to get CEOs to sign it. And so I forget which lecture, but we've written the letters. You all should have access to them, but let me just go ahead and stick the link in the chat. But
is that in Connect? Can I find it in Connect or not?
There might even be a better issue though that opened up this week to draft a letter about.
Yeah, and Todd, you've also mentioned a couple times like it might, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say on that. Mike, go to course materials and then go to the not that one, the reading material, that one, and there should say letter. It's just a letter to NASA now, but there are more letters. But let me put all the letters in. Yeah, let me get all the letters.
Todd, I'm going to try and finish up in 12 minutes, and then you can have the second hour or.
Sounds good. Yeah, all good.
So let me just share this entire folder. So answer your question, Mike has been telling me this story to the best of his ability. I mean, he's been doing a fantastic job. I've been trying to understand it to the best of my ability, and I have no experience. And I kept thinking, well, I can't replicate what Vertical Flight Society did and American Helicopter. They've been around for 100 years. But then when I hear Mike tell it, and he's like, he started this by himself, and he had, I don't know, how many signatures did you have? Like 8? And then to see the momentum that came out of there, it was great. So I just stuck a link in the chat of the letters. We've also made a spreadsheet. In that folder, we've made a spreadsheet of companies that we think should sign it. Now, these letters are just drafts, and we will want your all's feedback. And then Todd's going to discuss, and Todd actually helped draft some of these letters as well. So Todd, Mike, and I worked on these letters before we launched the cohort. So the idea is that we'll draft the letters, we will sign them. You guys will give your input on what that verbiage should look like, and then we'll submit them, and we'll just keep it going. So that, I think, is the first step. I hope I answered your question. And then bringing in, and by the way, this guy that Mike keeps talking about, Mike Barbera, he is I think the next lecturer. So he'll give us his feedback on what we're doing. So we are literally replicating what Mike did at, so he'll be May 5th, and along with his director of policy, I believe is who Jamie is.
Yeah, this is funny. So here we were supposed to talk on a month from now, on May 19th.
Yeah, so you did good.
Happy to join in. I mean, happy to.
But in a way, I think it was better this way because
Yeah.
I was able to ask, because I really wanted to understand that timeline. And so, Philip, the reason I'm asking the questions I'm asking is because I'm literally replicating it, what Mike did. Now I haven't gotten to the, bringing in a lobbyist part yet, because I don't know that, well, that stinks that it doesn't get any bigger. I see why you say it's distracting. It is. But oh, there you go. Director of policy and senior partner. So so the people that did this with Mike, they're going to be talking to us. So I hope that answered your question, Philip.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
So another issue, there's the government has different centers of excellence. They have something called the Vertical Lift Research Center of Excellence. Used to be the Rotorcraft Center of Excellence, the ARCOs, and then there were the Vertical Lift Research Centers of Excellence, so VLARCOs. And these are 3 universities that are funded through Army, primarily Army, but also Navy and NASA. And it's the lead institutions are University of Maryland, Georgia Tech, and Penn State. And there's another dozen or so other universities around the country. Almost all, probably all U.S. now, but generally only U.S. money goes to U.S. universities. And it was started in 1982, and for those of you guys who know your defense history, by a recommendation from Norma Augustine, who was previously a Secretary of the Army. But anyway, it was to help the nation build up its helicopter education and its helicopter industry. And it started out with something like $3 million in 1982, and today, 40 years later, it's still around $3 million or so. So it hasn't really increased. In fact, it's gone down because of inflation. But anyway, so we've been lobbying for, I don't know, VFS 6 or 8 years. We did finally get $3 million last year because of Mike and also my successor, Angela Collins, as VFS. And Jamie Paredes. I actually never worked with her, so, but I know Angela is. I worked with somebody, a previous person. But anyway, yeah, so this is all kind of long game. And we go into, workforce and future technology, try to make a case. So anyway, it took a lot of work. They met with, 30 different congressional representatives, ones from Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, saying this is important. The universities themselves were not advocating for it. That was not their primary interest. They wanted more money for AI and advanced 3D manufacturing, all this new tech. We just wanted it for modernizing current tech. So that was a case study there. I also wanted to mention. Did I lose it? Yeah. So the Planetary Society, I mentioned them before, but last Monday they had their day of action. So again, they're a 501c3 nonprofit. They do this. They've always done it once a year in the April timeframe, but last year they did one in October too. So I participated in October and the one that was last week. So it was something like 130 space advocates. I'm not a space advocate. I was carrying the party line, which was advancing support for NASA science, and the NASA science mission is space probes. Probes to, well, I don't think they do the moon anymore, but the Jupiter, to the sun, to Mars, Venus, all these interstellar robotic missions, unmanned missions. The Trump administration's budget came out the day that NASA astronauts were, making the record for how far away they were from the Earth, the dark side of the moon, like this incredible, horrific event. And then the budget came out and it slashed NASA science by 40% and aeronautics by 30% and NASA in general by 30%. So it was, an extinction level threat. And a lot of these space probes and missions to the outer planets and stuff like that. I mean, the money's already been spent. They're already out there. They're already cruising. I mean, they've spent $3 billion or whatever for each of these different space probes, and the Trump administration was going to cancel them or wants to cancel them. Basically, just stop taking the data. So, I mean, just really insane stuff. But anyway, it says here they met 280 meetings with House and Senate offices, and with the thing was save NASA science again. They did the exact same thing last year. This is really easy this time because it was something like 92% of both the House and the Senate voted basically in January, beginning of January, to approve to fully fund NASA for NASA top line, NASA science, and NASA aeronautics. That's why I join in with these guys, is to save NASA aeronautics. But met with all these offices. There were a lot of people like you there. They'd never been to Congress before. People meeting with their representatives had never done anything like this before. And we tried to meet with all the districts. There's, I think, 11 districts in Virginia. So we tried to meet with all of them. I think we got more than half. But it was, one of the people I was talking with, who actually I think works for a contractor for DoD, DOW, said, oh, like it wasn't like we were like trying to convince them of something. It was just like having a conversation. We were just talking about how important this is, and we already knew where people stood on the issue because there was an identical bill that they've all voted for, or almost all voted for, a couple months ago. So I guess that's the thing. When you go in to meet with your congressional representative, generally you meet with the staffer, which is fine. They're the ones that are actually going to do things under the approval of the member. But it was, we're really supportive of NASA. NASA inspires the world, and it creates a lot of science that helps here on Earth. And anyway, it was a relatively straightforward message. These are kind of three different, slightly different interactions that I've had over the years with Congress. I'm happy to answer more questions about some of these, but it's something that we should all be doing. And you have to figure out, like, when you go into an office, what are you asking for? Is the member on a committee that can, science and the Commerce, Justice, and Science Committee, or are they on a caucus, or are they interested in energy? Do they have do they have a PhD in physics or something like that, right? So you're trying to figure out if your member would be supportive of this, or even if not, just saying, hey, I'm in your district, right? I mean, that's an important thing. But they call this a day of action. Again, some people call it a fly-in because people fly in to meet with Congress. They have different names, Congressional Visits Day and things like that. But it's a way to reach, lots of members of Congress, and then you got to keep the momentum up, several times a year or whatever, to keep reminding them that you exist and that you think this is important. Put this link in there. Todd, you want to make any comments?
No, that was cool. That was good to hear how an organization move stuff around through the process. And it works well because I'm going to talk more about individual companies. So that's great.
So I'm curious. I got a question, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about the distribution of funds. So these get put into like a defense or science appropriations bill. And I've worked with Dave Joyce out of 14th District here in Ohio. And it's a little muddy, I guess, until you get a little bit closer to the center of these decision making apparatus. So that you have all these appropriations acts, these reauthorization acts, and they've essentially earmarked X amount of billions or however many millions for various different types. And it seems like there's just I'm missing an understanding of how a lot of that is distributed, and what does that relate to various, so like with respect to the Department of Defense, Department of War, in the process of creating this advocacy lobbying effect in Congress, are you working with appropriations for the dollar amount and also generating a contract? And then once all those things are codified into a bill and they basically are agreed upon in the subcommittee, how is all the funding distributed to the individual players? Does that, I mean, because is this like a plus up that you sort of add to NASA or Department of War, and then it's distributed based on a contract, and a contract basis based on sort of individual proposals from companies? Or is this sort of something that kind of, because I know they've been talking about removing earmarks, and they've largely, they're like, yeah, we've removed them, but they still essentially exist. So how much of this is, and I don't know, maybe you can answer this, maybe not, but I'm just kind of curious, the sort of the path of advocacy lobbying down into sort of contract creation in the Department of Defense, for a need that they might have, into, say, appropriations and funding, and then down to distribution. It's kind of unclear to me how those things get distributed through programs.
Yeah, that's, I think, Todd, you're going to talk more about that, right? I will say,
I'm not,
we'll talk
but I
we'll
can.
talk a little bit.
I can.
But yeah, for what, 20 years or 15 years, earmarks, there are no more, quote, earmarks. So you can't put in, they used to be able to say, fund Piasecki $5 million to do this study, right? They used to do
Right.
that. You can't do that anymore. What we did, again, this is for 2014, we gave money to the Army to use for the Future Vertical Lift budget line. So most things in Congress have a program element, a PE, which is a budget line, and there's one for Future Vertical Lift, or there's one for NASA Aeronautics. I think even below that they have advanced air vehicles. So you could put $5 million on that thing, and then it should go. We want to put $5 million for the advanced air vehicle project, to research hydrogen fuel cell integration, or hydrogen fuel cell technologies, or whatever. NASA they have to decide how to award that. They're going to do a contract, or they're going to do a source, they're going to do a BAA. Somehow they have to get, contracts, and then they're going to pick one. And you may spend a lot of money and time on lobbying, and you may not get the contract. That's America. It's competition. It's, capitalism. In this case, I'm showing here, we didn't tell them what they should use it for. But we got $14 million, and we did actually get this formally from the Army saying what they're going to spend it on. So some of the money was going to go to the two competitors, not Boeing and Sikorsky. Some of it went for this is architecture, joint common architecture, became what's now MOSA, modular open system architecture, and then some other stuff here. We didn't actually get any funding or any help from any of the companies this first couple of years. Eventually we got some from Karam. I don't know if we got money, but we got support from their lobbyists. The big companies didn't want us to lobby particularly because they wanted to strangle out the little companies. So anyway, I guess to sum it up, well, and maybe Todd knows the restrictions of this more, but you can't say, and I'm going to mess up your name again, Ethereum, right? Eternium, thank you.
Ethereum is the Bitcoin derivative.
Crypto.
Yeah, it's crypto.
It doesn't show on your name, so I'm like, I don't even say it. Yeah, so you can't say give $5 million to Eternium. You have to say, $5 million should go into research, whatever your company is developing.
Right. And they can make that language very specific so that it excludes everybody but your company.
And I also just want to a question and a point. Mike, how many of the people that signed the letter received funding from this? Obviously
zero.
Well, that's unfortunate.
I mean, no, somewhat by design.
Yeah.
It was not intended to. Oh, let me answer that different way. Let me answer it a different way. So this is not the money. So these are two different things.
Right.
This was go forward and do future vertical lift. This was this letter.
Yeah.
And Bell, Boeing, Sikorsky. Yeah, so these are the big helicopter companies. So Bell, Boeing, Sikorsky got money. Vertical Lift Consortium also got well, they didn't really get any money from this, but this was due a future vertical lift program, which eventually ended up being like $1 trillion program. But then when we were asking for the little dollops of money, this really went more to the smaller companies, the basically this not startups, but the underdogs, because the big huge companies they're like, well, we don't want $5 million. We're spending $500 million of our own money. We don't want $5 million, and we don't want you to give $5 million to these little guys either. We want them to atrophy.
Got it. And then the point I was going to make was very similar to what Todd just said. You could make the language very specific. Carol Bailey, who is fingers crossed that she's going to come in and do a lecture on defense. She manages a large defense budget, and her and I were on a call for a couple of hours one day, and the way that she explained it to me was the people or companies that advocate and educate agencies and Congress, agencies and Congress, it sounded like I said will, if done correctly, will likely be the beneficiaries. And I think that's just a different way of saying what Todd just said. So with that, we should probably go to Todd now. We're 10 minutes over, but Mike, I don't think we could have planned that better. That was exactly the timeline that I was hoping to get. I know it's a lot to digest, and how much experience did you have in politics before you did that?
My entire experience was reading in the magazine Vertiflight about what Rhett Flater had done before.
So that's my experience, is reading what you've done.
Yeah, but as the the CEO or the executive director of a nonprofit, I wanted to come out swinging for my members and basically took an act of Congress or several acts of Congress to get this stuff done. So it's passion and it's support from the companies. And you might think it's like, what the hell is writing this letter to NASA or to FAA or whomever? Is this going to really do anything? And the answer is probably not, but maybe. You get enough of these little pebbles rolling down a hill and you have an avalanche, and that's what we were able to do.
Did you guys drive the requirements at all on this? Because I know you're basically were saying to Congress, like, do a vertical program, vertical flight program. And I know the Defense Department really loves their, like, we've got requirements for, mission capability, et cetera. Did you just go to Congress and say, hey, we need more technologically advanced vertical airframes, or did you guys actually help the Army and Navy sort of kind of create those requirements?
We just said that, the Future Vertical Lift was this umbrella initiative to modernize all of the helicopters, replace all the helicopters they had. But in 2008 timeframe, actually going back, let's look on here. Like we started having discussions at the AHS at the annual forum, which is going to be next week, but it's always in May. Let me just see if I can find, I don't think somewhere I've got this slides. Like the head of Boeing said, look, the Air Force has got the 5th generation fighters and we're still flying 3rd generation helicopters. We as a community, we need to get moving and we need to convince, decision makers. We need to convince the Army and Congress and the Pentagon that, we need to do more things, advance the platforms. Lots of technology has gone into the aircraft over 50 years, but there's still the same basic airframe design from, the 60s or 70s.
Let's move on to Todd, because thanks for the question, Jared, and let's move on to Todd because I think some of this will get answered. So Todd was, I'm not sure what the situation is now, head of government affairs at Zero Avia, and was able to get hydrogen in the FAA Reauthorization Act and able to get zero obvious money. Todd is going to walk us through that timeline, I hope, or whatever you, yep, okay, cool. And I might jump in and ask questions if I'm not following, kind of like I did with Mike, but we only have 45 minutes and this is an important one for us to hear. So I'll let you take it from here.
All right, cool. Is it okay if I share some slides?
Yes.
Of course.
Are you seeing that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Right. June 2024, May or June of 2024, Congress passed the reauth of FAA, and it had a couple of hydrogen provisions in it. And I started working on that 2 years earlier. So I joined ZeroAvia specifically to help them get stuff through and into this reauth. So here's what the bill did. It introduces hydrogen into aviation as congressional policy for the first time. So there were three main things. One is that it allowed the AIP program. It allowed airports to use AIP funds to build or acquire hydrogen infrastructure. And that was cool because if you've been trying to get hydrogen aviation to be a thing, you realize that airports are a huge block. The other thing was to direct the Ascent program, which at the time was FAA's bulk fuels program for essentially clean aviation, to specifically include hydrogen. The program had been almost exclusively a SAF and noise reduction program until this. So the FAA Ascent team was heavily personally invested in SAF, just based on the amount of time they've been spent working on it. And they were very skeptical of hydrogen. And so we did an end around to get Congress to direct inclusion of hydrogen. And then the other thing was to get the FAA started on cert and standards for hydrogen aircraft, managing hydrogen at airports and things like that. So, and it set out a timeline to set up a pathway, sort of indirect thing, but which they actually met. So you're in this session because you recognize that the success of this technology is at least partially policy dependent. And I won't read that slide to you, but I think you already get it or you wouldn't be here. Policy allows us to get funding. Policy allows us to get other incentives. Policy encourages adoption. Really, when you're dealing with something like hydrogen and aviation, there's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of resistance from people who have investment in other technologies. There's a lot of resistance from people who fear something new. There's a lot of people who resist it because it's going to be hard work. And so you actually need policy engagement to help, chip away at the status quo, right? And to soften the ground, right? So these are the things that we tried to achieve in a FAA reauth, right? To make sure, really, it was just to put hydrogen aviation on the radar and have it spoken as a phrase in Congress, really. So how do we do this? First, we started with Congress because that's where it was happening. We talked to FAA and DOE about it, but we really weren't asking permission. We just wanted to sort of sense their positions to see if they were going to oppose us. And we started with our local folks. And in all of your efforts, and I can't stress this enough, doesn't matter whether your folks are important in that particular policy area. You owe it to them. It's like it's a courtesy, kind of respect, etc. to knock on their doors first and at least introduce yourself, your company, what you're doing, because they might not be directly involved, but they know Congress better than you do. And, you know, if you're nice to them, they'll be helpful as best they can. And then there are the committees, right? So if your rep is not, or senator is not.
Sorry to interrupt. Mike, did you have
Yes,
a
ma'am.
question?
No, I was gonna say just, you know, your representatives represent you. Let's go to your
Yeah, you're right. You're a
congressman,
constituent, right? Like they're, you know,
that's their
we
job.
have a representative democracy, right? We don't have direct democracies. Yeah.
I have a quick question, and maybe you'll get to this later. When you say and the key stakeholders, you first went to the agencies, just to kind of sense, you know, whether they would oppose you. Who did you go to? What did that look like? Was it a Zoom call? Did you organize something? Was it an
Oh,
email?
you know, it starts with email, right?
Mhm.
To introduce yourself, and then, you know, I'm in Washington, so it's easy for me to go down to the FAA and have a conversation. And you figure out who the players are, right? In the agency, you do your homework, you read and see who's delivering presentations, you know, on behalf of the agency. And so there's a chief scientist position at in the FAA Ascent program. So I started there. And, you know, made sure I rub shoulders with them at conferences and whatnot, you know. It's, you know, I'm a slow Washingtonian, right? There are people who will just come right up to a person they don't know and say, hey, this is who I am. And, you know, we really need you to do X, Y, and Z. And like, you know, I'm all about relationships.
I'm
Because
so happy that you said that. I think aviation and aerospace in general is that type of industry.
yeah,
It's very conservative. I don't mean politically, but technically,
yeah,
and very small. And it's all about trust.
yeah,
And you know, you have to build those relationships, and you don't
yep,
get a
yep,
chance to burn them with anybody who's anybody in this space. So I couldn't
right,
agree more that you don't
right,
want to. You have to make friends, and they
yeah,
have to know who you are, and they have to trust you, and they're going to ask about you,
exactly.
right? Hey, do you know this guy?
They got a million people a day asking them for stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you got to give them a reason to think you're going to be one of the serious ones, right?
And just to go back to my
Yeah,
sorry, you know, I was trying to explain. I didn't know the guy, right? So I'm trying to explain why, you know, logically they should care. But you know, my lobbyist Mike had a relationship, and
yeah,
he's like, hey, you know, cut to the chase here.
right, right. No, it
But
sometimes can save you a lot of time and trouble.
yeah, and
Lobbyists are expensive. Like, you know, the traditional DC firms, it's, you know, 15-20,000 a month for a small client. It's just, you know, but it opens doors. And you know, sadly, one of the reasons why it opens doors is because the lobbying firms are giving money, you know, that startups who are engaging in novel technology can't really do. But that it's not just the money, it's the money puts them in a room with
yeah.
people who are key.
Yeah.
I'll share this deck out with folks afterwards. So I won't list all the committees that I won't read through that list if that's cool.
But I do want to
But
emphasize, go
yeah,
back to that one for just a second, where you had, you know,
sure.
DOE and FAA and DOE. So Todd already knows who to talk to. He already did all the work. He knows like
Right,
the person to talk to at the FAA or DOE or whoever. So he already did all this groundwork so that
right,
for our purposes, you don't have
right.
to do that.
So,
You're not starting from zero.
but you know, our CEO, Al, he's a very impatient guy. You know, I started in April 22, and in June 22, I think it's great that I've, you know, got a meeting with an FAA, you know, scientist. He wants the bill to be done, right? So you have to manage expectations all around, really.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's legwork, and you know, that's
Off
right.
topic,
That's
but Vadim got a one-on-one with me with Val already, so you don't
okay.
need to
Cool.
do that anymore.
I won't
Yeah,
call
but
him.
Yep.
Excellent.
Mhm.
All right. So, your CEO doesn't want to talk to staff, right? Because they feel like they're not important, but you should talk to staff. And whether you're a CEO or not a CEO, it doesn't matter. Like, these are the people who get stuff done. And they tell your representatives and your senators what they should be doing. So it's super important
Okay, I got a couple
to
questions on this one.
okay.
I just need to rename myself to Miss Interrupter.
But
But
I could just talk through it.
well, because you probably will. You
Okay.
probably will. But I just want to say where my ignorant political brain is like, I think like here in Texas, like I have to meet directly with Ted Cruz, or like Greg Abbott, and
Right.
so I hope this slide helps. You'll explain through it like why that I don't need to do that. There are other people.
Right. Well, say it one more time.
Okay, so in Texas, my brain goes to like my representatives. I need to talk to like Ted Cruz
Yeah.
and Governor Abbott, who are very, very difficult to get in touch with. But you have listed on here chief of staff.
Start at the bottom.
Okay.
Start at the LA.
Okay.
Start at the LA level right here.
Okay. You said
Right.
bottom, but there's one below that.
Well, yeah, just skip that.
Can you just briefly go over like what I guess you do? They're the easiest to meet with, I'm assuming is.
Yeah. So the correspondent is a gatekeeper, right? And so just, skip past that. But really, let's start with this. Like the congressional staff are human beings, and you want something, but they want something. And until you figure out what they want, you shouldn't go and see them. Okay. And so what does a staffer want? Well, a staffer wants to either move up the chain or get his or her boss's attention, right? And the way you do that is by bringing something sexy to the boss, right? So you need to just, give yourself a little time to think about solving a problem for the person who's across from you, not for their boss, right? And so just, they've got 20 people a day. They're meeting people in half-hour blocks. Just think about them, right? And so you need to get them to trust you. You need to get them to understand that you understand what they need, right? Because it's transactional, and so the way you differentiate yourself is by couching that transactionalism in human interaction, right? If you have access, like if you can get access to an LD or a chief of staff through somebody obviously take the shot, right? But if you arm a legislative assistant with the right information and the right persuasive pitch, and they'll do the work for you.
Priceless. Thank
you. Yeah. And then the committees, they have a different sort of staff hierarchy. I love going to the professional staff members because they have the same issue that the legislative assistant has, right? They want to move up. And in this particular case, the FAA reauth, that really was where it all mattered in the end.
Yeah, so just to differentiate, there's personal staff members and then there's professional staff.
Yeah.
The personal staff member works is paid for and hired by the member of Congress, where these professional staff, they're there year after year after year supporting the committee, whoever's in charge of the committee and the committee members. So
right.
Very, very good point, Don.
So no, we were super lucky because Senator Cantwell was chair of the Senate Commerce CST Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. And so she's from the state of Washington, and we had some activity in Washington. So it was okay, in that case, we had a local senator who was important to us, and had the committee relationships we needed. But I ended up working with a professional staff member who, got wind of what we were doing, and I'd given her an introductory Zoom meeting with the deck, where I walked through the technology and all the benefits, et cetera. And it was really useful. And so you get your engagement strategy, you start with your delegation, you build relationships, you start then, getting tips from them on who are the committee members that I might be thinking about talking to. And so if you hear about somebody on a committee who's useful, you go to their legislative assistants, right? So it's a lot of, it's detective work really, but it's not rocket science. You guys do the rocket science. So and then you start to figure out who your targets are, right? Now, one of the things we did as part of this, I made some rounds with committee folks and staffers of folks who are on the committees. So I had, let's say, maybe 3 or 4 staffers in key places that were interested in this stuff. Paul Tonko's staff was one group, and Senator Cantwell's another. Brian Babin of Texas, Republican energy guy. What we did was, this was my idea, my great idea. In the spring of 23, we did a session off the campus of the Capitol. So we rented a room from the American Trucking Association that has a building nearby. We brought some tech stuff in, we had an engine and a couple fuel cells, and I did a blanket invite to congressional staff of the committees and then opened it up to everybody and invited people to come and listen to an introduction to, hydrogen aviation. And so we had to spend money on the room. We had to spend money on the shipping of the gear. And we got like a dozen staffers, and we offered food also, right? That's another thing with the staffers. They make no money. They are in it for the snacks. So keep that in mind as well. And so we did this like open house, we had a couple scheduled talks. And I flew one of our tech guys in, in case the questions got a little too deep for me. And as I said, there were only 12 people. And so I was very concerned about getting hammered for the costs that we were racking up. It wasn't that expensive, but well, it turns out that among those 12, there were 2 key people. One was somebody who was on detail from Department of Energy to the Senate Commerce Committee to write some of the energy related stuff in the bill. And another person was from Senator John Ossoff, a Democrat in Georgia, who has from his office, I think he was looking for cupcakes or something, and Ossoff was not on a committee that was relevant to us at the time. Anyway, the day ended, had a couple of interesting questions from the woman who was doing some of the energy drafting, which was great. And then and that was really it. And then like a few days later, I got an email from the Ossoff guy, and he was like, the senator wants to write some hydrogen provisions into the legislation. And I was like, that's great, but he's not on the committee. He's like, well, the other guy from Georgia is, and his office said they would put it in there. And so, I and the kid from Ossoff's office and the woman who was doing some of the energy drafting, started exchanging emails, and we started running legislation by each other, like text by each other, and there you go. We had some stuff, and it was pretty cool. And that's really how that language got in there. And then, there was a lot of meetings after that for me to keep pushing it through, especially on the Cruz side, because Cruz was the ranking member at the time. So he's the senior member of the committee on the Republican side. And his staff, you know, those two, Cruz and Cantwell, they work very well together. And, you know, if there was something that Cruz really didn't want, it wouldn't get in the bill. And just like now, if there's something that Cantwell really wants or doesn't want, it probably won't get in a Cruz bill either. I mean, they just, you know, despite what you read about, there's a lot of back and forth and give and take. So, so you know, you can't go to your whoever you're talking to and really they want to know what it is you want, what your ask is, and so you can't say, well, I want to, you know, increase adoption of hydrogen aviation. You got to be a little more specific and tell them how you want to achieve that end, because that's the stuff they can write into legislation, right? So like all the items that we've listed there, right? And it's always best to tie your ask to some piece of legislation that is currently in discussion. Otherwise, they don't know what to do with you.
And just to add on that,
Yeah.
you know, that might be, you know, the NASA funding bill or the
Right,
FAA.
right.
But you got to say specifically, we think this should go into this, you know, HR 123 or
Exactly. Right.
not. We think
And so,
hydrogen is great, and you know, has to be specific.
yeah, and it's important because, you know, after that bill passed in late spring, early summer of 24, I was stuck looking for a vehicle to get more items put into action. You can, you know, appropriate bills are obviously good for that because you can fund specific programs. But one of the things you want to make sure you can do, especially if you're trying to be bipartisan, is to make sure your messaging fits the person you're talking to or the office you're talking to. You know, if you know that you're talking to someone who doesn't really care about climate science or doesn't believe in climate change, then you're not going to lead with climate solution as your key item, right? I think with these folks, jobs is the number one way to go. I think China is the number two way to go. I think manufacturing is not necessarily the way to go, because I think they talk a lot about bringing back U.S. manufacturing, but I don't think any of them really believe it's going to happen. I think it's better to talk about supply chain than manufacturing. So jobs, supply chain, and China. Supply chain ever since COVID has been a huge issue. Now we have issues with the minerals and metals that we need, things like that. So it's not that hard. I mean, we're fortunate that we're working in a technology space that has benefits, right? That aren't just about climate. You know, I mean, I got into it because of climate, but it turns out there's a lot of other things. And we know, like, for example, the defense area is really has gotten so much more important in the last 2 years. So something to think about. So lead with numbers, right? Numbers are persuasive. And don't, so this was my mistake with ZeroAvia, I think. You know, ZeroAvia has been promising some timelines that just aren't feasible. And so I'm not ashamed to say, I think I shot some of my credibility by, you know, drinking the ZeroAvia Kool-Aid on timelines, right?
I just
But
want to
in the
jump in
end,
real quick.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. Brian has a question. He said, could you explain more on certification pathways, slide 11? What are these pathways? I'll just want to add a point
oh
to
yeah,
your comment that you just made. I think that is the nature by anybody with VC funding. Val is beholden to investors
yes,
with
yes,
unrealistic timelines. And
yep,
I don't know anybody that's gotten VC funding with a realistic timeline. If
right.
it was realistic, it wouldn't be revolutionary. And
That's a good
so,
point.
you know, I think that happens to anybody in that space. So I wouldn't hold you accountable for that. I mean, maybe some of those
No.
people do,
Yeah.
but I think, you were beholden to your CEO who's beholden to
Yeah.
investors.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, yeah, there's one of the PR goals of the company is always, raising more funds, right? And so the shorter your timelines, the easier that is to do. Directing certification pathways for hydrogen aviation. Essentially, the FAA had no intention of making rules for putting hydrogen on aircraft. And so the FAA bill, specifically said that the FAA was supposed to begin thinking about ways to set standards for hydrogen on aircraft and to begin to create a pathway towards certification. A lot of that got hung up last year, the change of administration. So you make these asks of people, but you'll be much more effective if you keep the relationship going. And so, providing things like going and talking to these folks, answering their questions about things that don't necessarily benefit your company, for example. Just showing them that every time you contact them, it's not because you want something, right? So you want to differentiate yourself from all the other transaction seekers as much as you can. And at the same time, what that does is it boosts your credibility because you become an authority and not just an advocate, right? That's really the thing. And then you get people coming to you to ask you questions. Hey, we're thinking about X, Y, and Z, in this new bill. What do you think about that? And that way you're actually hearing about new things that you wouldn't, that wouldn't be on your radar. So the more contact you have with these folks, and you can do it by like your company has a press release. So you send a press release out to one of your contacts and you make sure you include a note at the top saying, hey, whatever, hope things are going well, right? And you just build and build and build. And, the most important thing is if you say you're going to give them something, give it to them. And, just thank them all the time. Thank them, right?
So I have a question. So, you and I live in DC, so we go to we go to Congress, right?
Yep.
But you don't have to, right? Because they all have district offices, usually, multiple offices, right? So you can meet with staffers in the home
Absolutely.
office, obviously for larger geographically spread out districts, they might have several district offices. So
Yep.
it's not too far from you. And those people can also influence the members as well, right?
And you can meet people by Zoom. They don't mind doing a Zoom meeting at all. I think they probably prefer it in some ways. But the challenge with Zoom and Teams, I think all these meetings are more productive in person, right? Because you can, I don't know, you get a better read on other people, and I guess they get a better read on you as well.
It's more personable, and you're trying to establish a personal relationship with these people, a rapport, so they will listen to what you're saying and
right.
Hopefully.
But it's not to say, well, I just want to say though, that's not to say not to do it virtually. We have to work with what we have because I mean, there's people I've been working with virtually for years, and then when we meet in person, we're like, oh, finally you're real.
No, it's great.
So one thing I wanted, because I can't believe this time went by so quick. One thing I wanted to ask is, could you talk about what because Zero Avia was awarded at least one government contract, correct?
Yeah.
So could you talk about that, the amount, and what you did? Because you mentioned something like, Val, he wanted the bill now. Why did he want the bill for the dummies? Why did he want the bill? How was that going to benefit him? And how did that translate into funding for Zero Avia?
Yeah. So he wanted the bill, I think, so he could fundraise on the back of it, frankly. It's a sign to shareholder, to potential investors that the government is is interested in this is going to push it, give it a little push forward, accelerate timelines. And then the grant that we got with the FAA was in a program called Fast Tech, which was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which we also pushed for. And the Inflation Reduction Act came out, and a couple months later, FAA did a talk on how they were going to implement their FAST grants. And I went to that talk, and after that talk, I made sure to shake hands with the guy who gave the talk. And they were in the process of developing the rules and guidelines and topic areas. And, I made sure to follow up with a couple of emails to the guy. So when we got, when the applications came out, they were waiting for us. It wasn't like we applied cold. We had already been in long contact with them. There's so FAA offices are on Independence Avenue in DC, and it's across from the National Mall. And the guy happened to mention to me that they like going out, they like doing their meetings off site, at this coffee place in the Smithsonian Sculpture Garden. So we kept meeting there, and they're much more comfortable talking outside of the office. They can say things, and so in the end we got that funding. Another piece of funding we got was from the state of California to do a zero boil off liquid hydrogen
Storage.
truck, right?
Interesting.
And we got that because I started following all the hydrogen news around the country and climate change stuff, and we were active in California, and so we were looking for a CEC grant. And I don't even know how it came about, but I saw a PowerPoint deck from a guy, and it was close enough that I felt like I could reach out to him and just introduce myself. And guys like he's a science nerd, right? He's like the rest of us. And so he's just happy to have somebody reach out and express interest in the topic that he just talked about. And we started talking about hydrogen, and a grant program came out, and his office had a grant that fit us. And actually, Mike, that was the same grant that I think Jesse got onto as well.
I remember that. I can't remember the amount, but I sure remember that. So that's fascinating. The first thing you said, I had no idea that the IRA included anything to do with the FAA. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was because the Ascent office is their climate office.
Okay,
and
so I put a link in the chat. Is that the right thing? I just want to make sure, because that's very interesting. And then you said something that really stuck out to me, which was when this came out, you said they were waiting for us. That was exactly the takeaway that Carol, who I hope we can get to come talk to us, was giving me, that you're building these relationships so early on that by the time these opportunities come out, they know who's going to apply. And matter of fact, you're going to be the first one to apply because you're the one that made sure that it happened. So I think a lot of us, and including myself, I very much am healing from this, became like very jaded from applying for many things and thinking, oh, they only want to give it to their friends and this and that. But then I thought, well, if they only want to give it to their friends, I need to become their friend. And, and so, and that's really, Mike is kind of showing us the process, but you're also showing us the process from a company standpoint. But I just, that 2-hour conversation I had with Carol, I wish I had it recorded, because that was exactly the takeaway, was like, we're not going to say, make sure to fund, Eternium and FC Renew and, Zero Avia, but, or H2 Advisors. However, they know us, and when these opportunities come out, they're waiting for you. That was gold. That was gold. What you said.
And really, if I had one, if there's one takeaway that isn't in the slides anywhere explicitly, it's all about legwork and detective work to figure out who you want to talk to and what their interest is, right? And you got to bend your interest to their interest. So like, it's not everybody can afford to have a government affairs guy on their team, but at the time, Zero Lobby had the funding for that. But that's why the lobbyists and government affairs folks in DC are getting paid, because they'll do the legwork. It's easier for them anyway.
And they
but
have a lot of the
it's a
relationships.
prohibitive game. I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know anything about how well funded the companies on this call are, but $20K a month for a long shot on policy is insane. When you're
I'll just say now, ACG, Mike Barbera, they never raised their rates over the 15 years or whatever, but it was a fraction of the 20 grand. It was like we paid them 60 grand a year.
That's awesome. That's
five
awesome.
Grand, five grand a month. And I won't make any promises for this. Danielle, you're
Right.
on mute.
And
Thank you. I just said that was after the pro bono work. So that was after you guys
Yeah.
decided
Right.
to
right.
continue it. We only have 7 minutes left. I want to make sure and come back to, I don't remember if you said this, it's been a long day already. Still longer to go, but you mentioned there was a new
Oh yeah, thanks.
opportunity. I want to make sure
Yep.
that we cover that and how it might be relevant.
Yeah, it's so we talked about caucuses, right? And the hydrogen fuel cell caucus, when I first started doing this, the chair was Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, congressman. And he just put out on Thursday, I think it was Thursday of last week, bill called the American Energy Dominance Act. And let's see, I'll put the link in the chat.
Might
But,
give you chuckle.
I did. American.
I know.
Dominance is important.
Dominance
is.
is, apparently.
When I worked at Boeing now, but when I worked at Spirit Aerosystems, I was preparing an executive presentation, and one of my mentors said, you need to reword that to maintain our dominance. They love that shit. Ever since then, I'm like, just throw dominance in.
Right.
I mean,
But what it does,
very
what it would
Trumpian.
do, if it passes, and actually there's a Democratic version circulating as well. It restores the 45B termination date. One of the things we fought for last year when the one big beautiful bill was happening was they wanted to kill the 45B clean hydrogen production tax credits. And the win that we got was that they weren't going to kill it until projects that began in January of 2028. And so his bill would restore that to January 1 of 2033. So it's another 5 years, but which is huge because, it's not really easy to start, construction on a clean hydrogen production facility.
Right. I have two really quick questions. I heard last week that the SAF credit got killed. And from a very credible person, Texas Hydrogen Alliance Executive Director. I'm going to have her on a special webinar soon. Cool. By the way, she does tons of advocacy in Texas and in DC on hydrogen. So she'll be, anyway, you'll look forward to that.
Well,
she's
actually,
a wealth of knowledge.
That reminds me that there's some talk that the Gulf Coast Hydrogen Hub might not be dead. That DOE is considering not killing the funding for it.
Yeah.
I saw something for the hubs in general.
Well, they're still gonna kill the West Coast hubs because they're
the blue
states, but
yeah.
but the other 5, some of which shouldn't exist or are gonna get money. And Jared, I'm not sure where you all are in Ohio, but you're like on the cusp of 2 hubs, right? The Appalachian hub and the Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania hub. Well, no, that's
don't let me forget. I have a very
Midwest
important question about 45V, but I'll let Jared answer. Just don't let me forget. It's important. Anyway. Go ahead, Jared.
No, we're in Cleveland, so
okay.
wherever that is in the hub districting.
Yep. Yep. I think you might be in there.
I think is that the Midwest? I forget the name.
So Cleveland's far enough east that it might be in the Appalachian hub.
Okay, so 45V. I'm so happy that an aviation person mentioned 45V. We've done several webinars on this over the years, and the energy folks, they know this stuff so inside and out, and they just start talking in a language that is just way over my head. I have no idea what they're talking about. Okay, let's just say if Jared at Eternium started producing hydrogen, does he, this may be a dumb question, but there's no such thing as a dumb question. Does Jared's company get $3 like cash into his bank account, or does it go like as a tax write-off at the end of the year? What does that $3 per kilogram do? Explain to me like I'm 5 years old.
Okay. So you can get up to $3 per kilogram. You don't get cash for it. You get a tax credit for it.
What does that mean though?
Means it means that every dollar you spend comes off your taxes.
Okay.
As opposed to a deduction. But these particular credits are exchangeable. So
yeah, that part.
You can sell it for cash.
When do people start? When is this supposed to start? Are people getting these credits now?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. I don't know of anybody that gets one. I just hear everybody talking about 45V, 45V, 45V. But I'm like, well, when do we start getting these? Because
yeah, Frank would know. Frank would know. Oh, I'm sure. You know what? I'm sure Plug is all over it.
Okay.
And Frank is tight with Plug. He can tell you.
Okay. Do you? And you probably don't know. Maybe you do. How do you like prove? Like who checks how much?
Yeah, there's a whole like rule book.
Okay. Because like Millennium Rain Energy should be getting in on. They should be getting that money, in Ohio, and I don't believe that they are. Brian says, is it like a carbon credit like Corsia?
No, it really well, yeah, it's tradable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I guess a carbon credit doesn't go as a deduction on your taxes.
Right, that's a different right.
But that's the only difference.
Carbon credits, right? You're allowed a max carbon out thing, and this
And then reduces. Is it do they care how the hydrogen is made?
Well, it's got to be clean.
It's got to be clean. And how are they defining clean now?
It depends on it's a sliding credit based on carbon intensity.
Okay, gotcha.
So if it's I think it has to be below 0.45 kilos of CO2 per kilo of H2 to get the max. And then if it's over 4 kilos of CO2 per kilo of hydrogen, you're not eligible for anything. And then it slides in between there.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. Humongous thanks to Todd and Mike for putting together with like 2 days notice this lecture. Like I said, I don't think we could have planned it better. Don't forget that Todd has offered to help you. If you want to reach out to him personally, you can. He shared his email last time. Maybe you can stick it again in the chat, and I will upload this recording. I've also updated the reading materials. Go ahead.
I'll send the deck out to anyone who emails me.
Cool.
I don't want to just have the link floating out there in the ether, but I'm happy to send it to you.
Okay, cool. I'm late for another call. Otherwise, I would let us chit chat for a little bit more. But thank you guys so much. See you in a week. Bye. Yep.